Our guest this month, Heather Sanford. Hi, Heather. How you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you? Glad to be
I'm
here.
doing fantastic. I'm excited that the day's finally here. So I'm going to run through a couple of slides just to introduce today, and then we'll get rolling. And this month's topic is making room for your emotions. And just as a little bit of reminder, a coach is a mentor who unlocks the physical, intellectual, and emotional potential of an individual in the pursuit of personal empowerment and unique greatness through purposeful practice and shared optimism. So I'm excited to have Heather with us today. I'm going to introduce her in just a minute, but she may have never started out thinking she'd be called Coach Heather, but today she's going to be Coach Heather for all of us. And I can tell you, as we prepared for today's webinar, I probably owe her a bunch of money for the therapy that she's walked me through. So thank you for that, Heather, and I really appreciate it. Just as a reminder, I'm Coach Aaron Hart. If you want to catch me on Twitter, you can follow me at NYAaronHart. I'm the Vice President of Curriculum and Program Engagement for Varsity Brands and the Executive Director of Open. And I'm here in my office in beautiful central New York. And I will tell you, it's cold, and there was a couple of snowflakes in the sky this morning when I got out of bed. I'm most importantly husband and dad to the Hart family. So with that, I am going to introduce Heather. Go on to the next slide here. So this is Heather Sanford, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I will tell you that just in the short period of time I've gotten to know her, she's an amazing person, and I'm just so happy to be able to share our time together. So Heather, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get rolling.
Great. Thanks so much, Aaron. Yes, my name is Heather Sanford. I live in Ithaca, New York, which is pretty close actually to where Aaron is.
Yep.
It's only about 30 minutes or so. And I'm a psychotherapist and a consultant. And I also run an outpatient program at Tompkins County Mental Health for folks who have significant and persistent mental health and substance use struggles. So that's my day gig. And I also am a wife and a mother to 5 humans and 1 canine and some cats, but the cats don't really count because they don't pay attention to me. So, but the dog does. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I do. In my private practice, I focus on working with teens, specifically LGBTQ plus teens. I really like kids. At one point, I thought I would be a teacher, but then I ended up a therapist. So I know a lot of teachers really are therapists in disguise. So I'm not really sure what the difference was. Just I don't get the same work hours, I suppose. And I don't get I don't get to watch kids grow all the way. I just get them period. And usually hard periods, not like all of the good stuff too. So
Right. Well, what you do is extremely valuable for families and kids, so we appreciate it. And as a curriculum nerd, I can say that all of the background training you did to maybe become a teacher one day definitely helped you out because you have some good curriculum writing chops. So I appreciate that as well. And I also just want to introduce the book we're going to talk about today. It's Not Always Depression by Hillary Jacobs Hendel, and I'll share the link to Hillary's website in the chat in a little bit. But Heather, you work really closely with Hillary. We're going to have Hillary on this series early in the spring. And my good friend Ann Kubitsky from Look for the Good also has worked with you and Hillary to incorporate all of the concepts we're going to talk about today in this book into her work at the Look for the Good project. So a lot of our guests might be familiar with Ann's work. So I thought that I would kind of throw that out there as well. Well, as good teachers, we need to have objectives. So the first objective for today is to learn skills to help us make room for all of your emotions. So I know that it's teachers joining us today, and as teachers, we're always concerned about our students. But what I'm going to encourage everyone who's on the call today, look at this through your lens, not through the lens of how this is going to help your students. Because if you can look through it through your personal lens, your improved ability to embrace those emotions is going to help your work with your students. So again, it's not selfish to take time for self-care. So hopefully this will be a piece of that. Understand the basics of the change triangle. So we're going to introduce the change triangle today. how that works. And I had thought about, what if I couldn't get Heather on today's episode? Would I go through the change triangle myself? And then I'm so glad she's here because she's going to do a much better job than I ever could have. And then objective number 3 is to unearth your authentic self. And I know that sounds like a big promise, but unearthing your authentic self, I think, is one of those ongoing things that we're always doing. So today, hopefully, will just be the start. So those are the objectives for today. And it's pretty much where I'm going to stop leading this, and I'm going to turn things over to Heather just a little bit, so she can guide us through today's journey and have some insights for us. And so, Heather, it's all yours.
Thanks. I think I obviously I'm not a teacher. I do have family members who are teachers, and I have lots of children who've been experiencing a lot of struggles in the last couple of years, as you all have. And the amount of stress that teachers are under, I can't imagine. So thank you for giving up a little bit of time to be here. And I really do hope this is helpful for you, both personally and also professionally, because when we are our best selves, then we interact with others and as our best selves, and then we can help them become their best selves, which is, I think, what everyone here is hoping to do. So we'll start with a little discussion on emotions and why they're important. So first, I would like to read this poem to you called The Guest House by Rumi. And when you're hearing this poem, I know you're probably eating your lunch or trying to also do 12 other things at the same time. But if you can take a moment and just notice how the words feel in your body. So like as I'm reading them, notice what comes up for you. So, The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So consider what it feels like just to think about letting in every emotion. Not just ones that quote unquote feel good. And the emotions that are easier or more pleasant to experience for each person is different. So some people really don't want to experience joy and excitement because those are scary, but like that's too much. Other people, anger is the hardest, or fear. So I'm wondering if you could all take a second and just pop in the chat, and then I'll read a couple off, of what emotions are the most uncomfortable for you to experience personally.
So Heather, I'm gonna jump in. I'm not gonna type in the chat box, but while other people are thinking this through and kind of taking some time to put stuff in there, one of the emotions that's most challenging for me to experience is anger, because when I get angry, I get super angry, and then it doesn't go well, and so I do everything that I can do to kind of tamp that down, because I'm afraid I'm gonna say or do something that I kind of regret.
Yeah. Anger is certainly hard for a lot of folks. And I'm reading here anxiety, a couple of anxieties, conflict, anger, depression, sadness. Yeah, lots of different emotions. So when we think about emotions, we want to think about them as like messengers, right? They're here to tell us something, just like they're talking about in the guest house. Everyone is here to tell us something. So all of the emotions have some message for us. They have energy, they have an impulse, and they really just want space and want to be listened to. And on the other side of the emotion is where we find our best selves, where we find our most authentic self. And like, that's where we're going today. We'll talk a little bit about emotions, and then I'll introduce the idea of the change triangle. And then our last step will be to try to experience finding and interacting with our best self, our most authentic self. So perhaps you can get a little taste or a reminder, because you've probably been there before, of what it feels like to be there. And perhaps it will make it a little easier to allow yourself to experience emotions that are uncomfortable when you know that there's something that's good on the other end. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so core emotions all have energy. That's the whole purpose of emotions. So in this slide here, you see one person who's looking like they're pretty excited, they're dancing around, another one who might be angry, or maybe there's fear. Just look at their bodies. It looks like there's movement in their bodies, there's energy. And understanding emotions as energetic experiences helps us understand why they have to be released. They're not something that lives in our head, but they're something that lives in our body. So emotions happen below the neck. And that's sometimes hard to get in touch with, because sometimes we are pretty distant from our bodies. For folks who have experienced a lot of trauma, or maybe feel like they don't fit in their body, or have injuries or some physical struggles, it makes it harder for us to connect with our body. And then in order to be able to connect with the emotions, we need to connect with what's going on in our body. And oftentimes we've been taught since young children, just turn that off. Don't turn off what's going on in your body because emotions are too much. So we have to override that first in order to be able to understand and connect with emotions, and be able to understand how hard it is to connect and give ourselves a little bit of space and a little bit of grace, and keep trying just to notice what happens in our bodies. I know, so today there's a bunch of teachers here, many of whom might be coaches or phys ed teachers. And maybe it's a little bit easier for you folks to be able to connect with your bodies. That I had a really hard time understanding how emotions showed up in my body, because I didn't have a lot of access to the feelings in my body until I started lifting weights. And when I started lifting, the coach was always on me about my form and what my body was like and where I was feeling different things. And that helps me really understand that my body had feelings. So yes, physical sensations, because realistically, emotions are just physical sensations. Right? They're physical.
Heather, I'm going to jump in for just a second. And I talk with my students here at the university all the time about how we've engineered movement and physical activity and connection with our body. We've engineered it out of our lives, right? It used to be, in order to survive in this world, we had to be very, very vigorously physically active. And so our emotions were a part of that process. But now we experience all of our emotions looking at a screen a lot of times, right? And the way that your body jumps into action is significantly different when you're, just holding a small screen in front of your face, as opposed to, what our bodies were really meant to do over the thousands of years, and that was be vigorously physically active. So I think it's hard for a lot of people to connect that, that piece of it, that our emotions are a part of our physiology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. Emotions really are just a bunch of physical sensations. And then we just came to label them as an emotion, but they're physical because nature intended them to make us move, just like Erin was saying. So if you go on to the next slide here. So core emotions propel us to act. That you might feel energy coming up, or just really wanting release. And if you look at these kids here, that's a lot of energy. Our emotions want the same amount of attention. So emotions are really pretty simple. It's when we squash them down, that's when they become complicated and murky. So one of the things that we'll learn when we review the change triangle is how to separate emotions from other things that keep us from feeling them, so that we have access to the emotions. If we can learn to listen to the sensation of a core emotion, they'll tell us what we need. Right? Each emotion has an action tendency that's adaptive in nature that's supposed to help us survive. Okay, so fast forward here. So just for example, here are some of the basic emotions. And in Hillary's book, she names 7 core emotions. Also sexual excitement, which is not on here because I think we understand what sexual excitement tries to compel us to do. But sadness, it pushes us to seek comfort. Like that's the idea. In its purest form, without defenses, without us like looking through our own lens of like our own experience of life or trauma, sadness pushes us to want comfort. And joy like compels us to share it. Right? If you're feeling really excited about something or joyful, like you want to smile, like your face lights up. That's an outward expression. It's the energy bubbling up. And disgust wants us to expel toxicity. When I explain this to kids or like teens, I think about if you took like a giant chug of milk and it was like spoiled and it's disgusting, obviously, and you spit it out. You literally expel it because your body is reacting to the fact that you're going to get sick if you drink this. So our emotions are here to keep us safe and tell us things to do. And it's the same thing with like people. If there's toxic people in your life or situations that are just unsafe. Sometimes folks, like as Erin was talking about, like have a hard time letting themselves experience anger. And anger really has been vilified, like in a lot of different ways, like don't be angry, calm down, like things that people say all the time, meaning well, but also anger has a really important role. Anger shows us that there's something that we need to protect against and defend. It helps us set boundaries, which also keep us safe because it helps us notice that something's wrong. When we get angry, somebody has wronged us or something's not right. So it actually has a really important job to do. Fear wants us to run to safety, and excitement is expansive. Excitement just wants us to like bubble out and share with lots of people and really celebrate. Also an emotion that's been tamped down a lot by society. Perhaps you've heard, don't get too big for your britches, or be humble, all of these kind of things. And then the energy gets stuck. So if we don't express the energy gets stuck. And if the emotions get stuck, they're going to come out sideways. They're going to go somewhere. Right? So if we don't express them as the core emotion and listen to them and do what they ask us to do, to be able to release them and move through them to our more authentic self, like our best self, that we're going to have some troubles. So Erin, I see you nodding there. Can you think of a way that sometimes emotions might come out sideways if you don't deal with them in the moment?
Well, absolutely. And, thinking through this as a teacher, especially a physical education teacher, we have to figure out how to rein in excitement, right? Because students are so excited to come to us. They're so excited to see all of the colorful equipment that we're going to use and be in a large space where they can move their bodies, especially after they haven't been able to move their bodies, for maybe an hour or more. It's one of those things that I could remember, and actually I still do it sometimes, students coming in and me tamping down that excitement in a way that probably isn't the best for the students, right? Now, we can't have chaos. We have to make sure everyone's safe, and we have to make sure we do learn how to self-regulate and, channel our excitement in the right way. But I think too, and again, I told everybody to not have their teacher lens on, and here I am, looking through my teacher lens. But the more we can create an environment where excitement is appropriate and safe, the better off we'll be. And as I was thinking, as you were talking too, back to kind of like what our bodies were meant. I remember when my daughter was young and I was working with a bunch of her friends, and we had gone to like a weekend retreat at a campground, and the dads were standing around talking about the weather changing. And I remember a lot of the girls not understanding the natural cues of the weather change, and how odd I thought this was for like preteen, teenage girls to not really be able to read the signs of nature that there's a rainstorm coming. But again, we're engineering a lot of this sort of interaction out of our lives. And I think the interaction with our emotions too, we have a rise in anxiety, we have a rise in depression, we have a rise in a lot of different things that we try to look at and say, how do we just instantly fix this, instead of like saying, what's the core here? Why does it need to be fixed? Why are we out of touch? And I just think that a lot of those things kind of are good parallels to look at. So I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's what I was thinking of as you're kind of talking through these.
Yeah, excitement is a really good example. I know that as a parent, I also tell my kids to simmer down.
Yeah.
They're excited and like jumping around and like it's too much noise for me. I'm uncomfortable. So like I tell them, stop. And there's no reason why they have to stop. But it is my job as a parent to help model, like, this is what you do with excitement. When we're excited, we act like this. We don't throw things around the house and run around like a maniac. We might say, I'm really excited, or wow, I really need to go outside and jump on the trampoline. I don't know that I would say that personally, but that's what like maybe kids could say. Right? So we, like, as adults, we're the models, but we have to figure out how to do it ourselves. But unfortunately, oftentimes nobody taught us. So like we're learning from scratch. So I think I hear this, I hear this time and time again. After I read the book that Erin showed, Hillary's book, It's Not Always Depression, like it literally was like life-changing for me. I already was a therapist, but I didn't really understand how everything was connected. And I spent a lot of time talking about, oh, this is what depression feels like. What are the things you can do to feel better? You go on a walk, eat well, be in sunshine. It didn't occur to me. I didn't understand. Nobody taught me that depression is a symptom, and it's a symptom of something else, of an underlying emotion that I wasn't experiencing. So when I was able to figure that out with the help of a therapist and reading this book, that things have really kind of shifted. I used to be anxious all of the time, like 100%. Very anxious today, but this is like episodic. There's a reason. I didn't just wake up anxious. And that used to be the case until I realized there was something else going on. So I really feel strongly about teaching about emotions, both like for adults and for kids. But Hillary and I have been working to teach adults about emotions education because we missed it. There's more focus now on teaching kids. Like my 6-year-old got more of an education in emotions in school than my 12-year-old. And so I think it's getting better for sure. And that's because of like these kind of efforts. Right? How can we incorporate wellness more into our lives? And what does wellness look like? So this I really appreciate. And so we've been working, we created an 8-week curriculum that can be taught. And right now it was written for adults. The next step will be to modify it for like teenagers and then younger kids. And we're working with Anne and her work. And I'm so excited for her work and her books to come out. I'm very much looking forward to them. And we have heard in the classes over and over again that I didn't know this. I wish I knew this when. If somebody had told me that anxiety could be like fixed by this instead of just taking meds, sometimes you need meds. I'm not like smashing meds at all. Sometimes it's both. But people just didn't know. And you can't take kids, in your role as teachers or parents, you can't take kids any farther than you've gone yourself. So if you're not able to express excitement in a way that's safe and fun, it's going to be really hard to teach kids. And it's going to be uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
My discomfort with excitement is why I tamp down my kids. Shh, stop. It's too much. It's too much. So I have to look at me, not them.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a younger friend of mine who was getting ready to be a dad for the first time. And he was kind of nervous, as young, to-be fathers would be. And he starts asking me, what's the hardest part? And I said, honestly, I get the most frustrated and angry with my children when they're doing something that I know comes from me. Like they're acting the way that I know I act. And it's something about myself I don't like.
Mm.
And I see that reflected. And then I tend to like have that moment where I'm super frustrated or snap at him or something like that. And I've learned over time to like take a step back and say, you know what, I apologize that I snapped at you. And it's only because that's exactly what your dad did when he was, 17 years old or whatever. And so that was the best advice I could give him. I don't know if it's helpful, but I think you're exactly right. Like a lot of us, we didn't get this from our parents for whatever reason. And I'm not bashing my mom and dad or anything like that. But the reality of the situation was these conversations didn't happen. And so I am grateful that they're happening now. And I hope that this is a turning point for emotional education within our schools, because obviously, as we look around, it's super necessary. So anyway, that's kind of where my thoughts were going there.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. That's absolutely the truth.
All right. Are we ready to dig into this?
Yeah, let's move back into the next slide. All right. So this is just a representation of the change triangle. And this change triangle was created by Hilary Jacobs Hendel. And you can see her information is at the bottom. There's lots of free resources on her website that you could use for yourself to kind of work through. The blog is amazing. There's a blog each month. I've learned so much. It's like free therapy, just reading through the blogs. And so that might be something that might be a way for you to connect with the material. You don't have to read the whole book, but can you read a 5-minute blog? And you'll get something out of it for sure. So when Hilary created the change triangle, it came from an older idea. It was first written about by David Milan in the 70s. And it was called the Triangle of Conflict. And then it was changed a bit more by Diana Fascia, who is the founder of AEDP, Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy. And that's what the change triangle is all based on. And then the change, and she called it the triangle of experience. Hilary simplified it and made it really accessible to the public. So if you read her book, it really does read like really quite easy. And because she really felt strongly about emotions education. Emotions are like universal. So everyone across cultures experiences emotions. There's different values around emotions, but everyone experiences them. So if we think about this triangle here, I'll just kind of outline it for you. Here in the top left corner, as you're seeing it, are defenses. And defenses are anything that we do to avoid emotion. So for example, someone had mentioned that depression was an emotion that was difficult for them to experience. And I would argue that depression is not an emotion. Depression is a symptom. So depression is actually the defense. It's the defense against whatever the core emotion is. Because when you're really depressed, you're feeling like not a whole lot of anything. Maybe you're feeling terrible, but you're not feeling whatever emotion is going on. There's also chemical depression that requires medication. So the two different things. Other defenses, though, some people might call them coping skills. Right? Defenses are not bad. That's something that's really important to remember. The defenses are not bad. They're very useful tools that came to us for a reason. We needed them at one point in order to be able to be safe, because we all want to survive. Like our goal from birth is to survive. So if we have to learn how to deal with our emotions or other people's emotions and maintain safety, we're going to have like defenses, right? So some examples of defenses might be things like overworking, or it could be using humor. If you think of someone who, like in a serious conversation, their partner calls them out on something and they tell a joke. Well, maybe it like lightens the mood at the moment, but what are they really feeling underneath that now just got squished down because this defensive humor came up? And it's not on purpose. I would say that probably most of the time we have no idea when we're using defenses unless somebody else tells us. So we really have to slow down and look at how we are responding to situations. So other defenses could be things that are like less healthy, like substance use or overeating, self-harm. Sometimes suicidal ideation is also a defense. right? When emotions are too much, just can't do this anymore, I'm going to literally check out. So, I mean, obviously it's something that we want to take seriously, and it's not minimizing it by saying this is a defense, but this is its purpose. The defenses have purposes. So we also can choose to use defenses if we're feeling overwhelmed by emotions. So at any point in the day, like you are somewhere on this change triangle. You might be in a defense, maybe on purpose, or maybe that's just where you are. You could also be in an inhibitory emotion in the top right-hand corner. And those are anxiety, shame, and guilt. So they are emotions, but they're emotions that block us from feeling the core emotion. And anxiety and fear are difficult to tease out, so we won't go into that today. There are some really specific differences that can help you understand whether you're struggling with anxiety or experiencing like a core emotion, fear. And it's most important to figure out where you are, because depending on where you are, that would affect how you need to respond in order to feel better. Our goal is to get to the bottom of the triangle through the point, through the core emotion, and into the open-hearted state of the authentic self. And that space is the spot where you feel good, usually. You're calm, maybe curious, connected. Hillary calls it the C's: compassionate, confident, courageous, clear. I also like throw in quiet, even though it's not a C, because when I'm in this space, I feel quiet. Like my insides feel quiet, mostly because I'm not experiencing like the debilitating anxiety. And I'm not like moving, trying to do all of the things to avoid the anxiety. So I like identify the open-hearted state as a place where I'm quiet. My insides feel quiet, and I feel like I can connect with other people in a more authentic way. Right? My best self is present. So, as teachers, you're interacting with people all day long. Like there's a lot of peopling. With little people, with your coworkers, then you might go home and have people at home, and then we're always working with ourselves. So there's a lot of pressure to be our best self, and it's exhausting. And nobody lives there all the time. Or at least I haven't met anybody who lives there all the time. Because like something happens and a defense pops up, right? We might experience an emotion, like Erin was saying, anger. And for whatever reason, based on Erin's history, which we won't make him share, but based on Erin's history, anger may not have been an emotion that was safe to experience from others or to express. So perhaps when that happens and he starts to notice anger, or his body senses anger, then he will automatically pop into either an inhibitory emotion, anxiety, shame, or guilt, or a defense, so that he's not feeling that emotion. So sometimes that's great, because you can be really angry, and you don't need to necessarily respond in that moment. So you might need a defense to kind of put a cork in it until you can address it later. But that's the key, to address it later. Right? Because as I said, emotions don't go anywhere unless you help them out.
And I think too, just to kind of keep going with that, for me, I am one of those humor guys where if I start to feel that anger kind of bubble up, I'll crack a joke, I'll do something silly, I'll revert and totally change the subject in order to just kind of get out of the moment. And you're right, like now that I'm thinking about it, like sometimes you got to put a cork in it, like you said, like I can't be angry right now. I've got to, deal with whatever crisis or anything that's happening in front of me. But I think just in my own life, and thank you for making me not like go into the deepest, darkest spaces of my soul on this call. But I don't normally deal with the anger. I leave the cork in there. And then the challenge is once that cork comes out, like, the bottle gets shaken to the point where the cork's going to just come out. It's tricky. And that's the piece that is super scary for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Also for you, anger and fear got twisted together. So the fear comes up when there's anger. And so in order to be able to process through those emotions, they have to also be separated out and seen separately. So there's a lot of movement on this triangle, but we know what to do in each corner. Like we know how to get through it. So it's not really a mystery. So when you were saying, Aaron, about like the bottle being shaken, if we don't deal with emotions as they arise or shortly thereafter, they do just build. And maybe a little thing happens, like you lock yourself out of your car, which like to me is like a 5, because usually I'm in a hurry, but maybe it's really not that big of a deal, but you might explode. You get so angry, you're kicking the tires, you're throwing your stuff around, you yell at the tow truck man when he comes to like unlock you for no reason. He took 7 minutes instead of 4, and they said 4 on the phone, so you like lose it. It's not about that only. Yes, you're angry about this situation, but it's also attached to all of those other times that you were angry and didn't express it. So it's easier to express anger in smaller pieces than all at once. But nobody taught us to do that, because people told us to, not be angry, just smile.
Right. And the one thing I love about the book is that it makes everything very accessible. Like you were saying, like the language is very plain. There's case studies that walk you through that you can relate, at least I can relate to almost every case study that is in the book. And, at the same time, it really outlines like everybody expresses these emotions in the same way, basically, right? Like you were saying, these are universal. It's not, there's nothing mysterious about it. And it sort of kind of clicked in my mind, not just in how I interact with myself, but how I interact with my loved ones. Like I can't fix my kids' fear. Like I can't, and I shouldn't, by the way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is like I shouldn't fix their fear, but I should be there to help them work through that fear instead. And that's total, that was revolutionary, at least for me, because I was the guy, like, I got to fix everybody. I have to like fix everybody's bad feelings. And yeah, I mean, the book just capitalized in my brain, like, dude, that's not your job, man. Your job is to like help people work through the emotions, not fix them.
And sometimes the working through part is just accompanying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is just like, yeah, your kid is scared, they had a bad dream. You can't vanquish the monster in their brain, or from their closet, you can do a little bit of vanquishing, but you can't make it go away altogether. But you can say, hey, I can sit here with you till you fall back asleep. Right? Or you can come sleep in my room tonight. Maybe you want to leave the light on, and just validate the fear and be with it, and not have to worry about fixing it. Right? You're just here. Let me just be here with you. Like, this is hard. It's scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, here I go with my teacher lens again, but just over the last 2 years, I think that that's where we as teachers can almost take a deep breath and take the pressure off just a little bit for our students. Like, let's just be there as a safe person for these people, for these young people, right? Where we don't have to dig into the deepest, darkest places. We don't have to fix whatever's happening outside of the school, because it's probably going to be impossible. But let's be a safe person for them and just accompany them, to your point.
Yeah. No, I know that we're looking at this through human lenses or grown-up lenses, not teacher lenses, but I guess a little plug for, being the best teacher person you can be. When I was in high school, I had a math teacher who like literally like probably saved my life. She was there. She was just there, just that safe person like Aaron was talking about. She couldn't fix like the problems in my family or in my life. Like nobody could. I'm pretty sure they were like just not able to be fixed, but she could be there. And she was in a place where I would say now, looking back, that she was mostly living in her like open-hearted state. Not all of the time. She also experienced other things, but she could deal with them, and I could see that. So I was able to see, oh wait, it's not awful to have an emotion. It's the what we do with it part. And at home, I was just told don't have emotions. So it was very confusing for a while, but I knew that at school, I had a place to be. I had a place where I was safe and where like I was going to be accepted. And if I was upset, it was going to be okay. And there wasn't going to necessarily be that fix, but there was going to be somebody who was there. And like, I mean, I'm 38, I've been out of school for a bit now, and that relationship still exists. And I was her student for 1 year or 2 years, maybe in high school, but I always was in her room. And she followed me through college, and I still go and see her now. And my kids know who she is and go and see her on the in the summers and weekends when we have like time. And that's a really important relationship because I know that she's safe for me. It wasn't about math and it wasn't about fixing my problems, but it was just about being there, like just being that safe place. So that was really important. And I don't know, I mean, I know that you know your jobs are important, but like your jobs can be very important in ways that you don't may not see on the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such an important part of really the whole series that we're trying to do now. And just to be that reminder, we can't give up. Like what we're doing as educators is just so important that we don't even know, like you said, that we've got to keep working through the struggles to stay there for our kids. So yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. And I think also it's important to remember that you can't give up on yourself either. Okay, so
Right.
this talk is about the adults here in the room. In order to be the best self you can be for the students to create that space, sometimes we have to turn the attention on ourselves and really kind of give ourselves some compassion that you're doing the best you can.
Right.
Realistically, if we could do better, we would do better. We're doing the best we can. And sometimes we all need a little bit of compassion and a little bit of understanding, both for each other, but also for ourselves. Right? You're going to have a bad day where you yell at kids and you tell them, just simmer down, or, this same math teacher threatened us all the time. She's going to rip our lips off in a loving manner. If we talked too much. Probably shouldn't do that. Like 20 years ago, maybe that was okay. But you're going to lose your stuff sometimes and be upset or be super anxious about something happening outside of school. Like you're never going to be perfect, like nobody is, but you can always just try your best. And our best today is different than our best yesterday and our best tomorrow. And then that also helps us be able to see students and others and with that same like kind of gentle lens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So from this change triangle, should we jump into the cheat sheet? Because when I saw that, I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense to me now. Once we're able to kind of take a peek at it. So I'll let you talk through this diagram.
Yeah, and we're going to talk through it by talking about Aaron, another moment of his life. So as I said, like at any time you're somewhere on the change triangle. So figuring out where you are is important. And you can read that book. You can take our emotions education class. There's lots of ways you can check out Hillary's website so you can have a little bit more understanding. Figure out where you are in the change triangle. And at each spot, there's a something to do. We're not just like recognizing, oh, I'm sitting in a defense right now. I'm like really angry. And this anger is a defense, not a core emotion, because really I'm sad. We don't have to just notice it. We can do something. So if we notice that we're in a defense, the first thing that we can do is to validate it. This defense is here for a reason. It showed up. It became one of my go-tos because I needed it. So it's really almost like we have to thank that defense, like recognize it. Okay, got it. I understand. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. At one point I needed you. Right now I got this. So just step aside. And like we talk about like moving them aside, working with both kids and adults, sometimes it's helpful to think about like visualization. So like I literally think of like a bulldozer or like one of those big like scoop machine things, like scooping the defense off. And it doesn't have to go forever because we might need it again, just long enough to just kind of figure out what's going on. Sometimes when we move the defense, we can easily see what the core emotion is, right? So if you think maybe you, or maybe like, if you think about like how society is working with children or in general, that like little boys, my little boys are way more likely to be angry and act in an angry way, like as a defense, than to say that they're sad or they can't do their work, right? My 12-year-old trashed his classroom yesterday because he couldn't ask for help and because it was a role play. He couldn't do it because he doesn't have social skills. He's working on them. So he trashed the room. So anger came out as the defense. He wasn't actually angry. He was embarrassed and sad and like afraid that kids were going to know that he couldn't do it. So he had a core emotion underneath. And that was really easy to see after the teachers and aides were able to calm him down. So sometimes you can go right from defense to core emotion. And remember, emotions live in our body. So you'll know you're having a core emotion if you're feeling something like a physical sensation. And it could be like pressure in your chest. It could be like that knot in your stomach. Sometimes people like their eyes will like have a hard time, like you'll have a hard time seeing. Like it can be pretty extreme, or it could be like not. It really depends on how much you can check in. And if you're not experiencing a defense, you could be experiencing inhibitory emotion. Like anxiety is like, I think, a big one. But also guilt and shame. And each one of those are like managed differently. Okay, so anxiety would work to calm it down. Shame, we want to like shine some light on. Like shame lives in the shadows. So when we talk about what we're ashamed about, usually we find it's not as bad as we think, or it's like misplaced. And then there's also guilt. Like guilt is we actually did something wrong. When we actually do something wrong, we can fix that. We can say we're sorry. We can do our best to not do it again. That doesn't mean someone's going to accept your apology, but you can do your part. And then when that has been like settled, we can have a better idea of what's going on with the core emotion. So with core emotions, like that's not where we want to end. We don't want to end and just be, all right, I'm in my core emotion of anger. Here I am, I'm angry. We want to move through that. So name the core emotion, validate and accept it, even if it's hard, right? Like we get angry for good reason. Notice where it is in the body and stay with it. Right? So instead of shutting down that uncomfortable feeling, just notice it, kind of be with it. Remind yourself that this wave is going to pass. It's literally like emotions come in a wave. They are like little, they get big, that they crest, and then they come back down. And it doesn't last that long. In the moment, you're like, this is going to last forever. I'm going to be sad forever. I am literally going to cry for 70 years until I die. And in that moment, that feels really real. And also the rational part of you knows this is going to pass. It's like a wave. You can also use fantasy to satisfy the impulses. In Hillary's book, there are lots of really great examples of using fantasy to satisfy impulses. Our brains don't know the difference between fantasy and reality in terms of how we're like processing the experience. So when we're able to move through the core emotion, we end in this open-hearted state. This is like the best place to be. It feels good. This is the place to make decisions, to connect with others. And as I said, we don't stay there all the time, but that's like our goal. Right? So when you look at this cheat sheet, you know what to do at each corner. So you're never stuck, right? Emotions are not a mystery. They tell us things and we just have to listen and follow through.
Yeah, this helped me so much because I saw the change triangle for the first time and I was like, I really want to be open-hearted. How do I do it? Like, my defenses are here. I can recognize them, but sometimes I do have to be okay. And then the inhibitory emotions, I think too, that was brand new for me. Like I thought my anxiety was the core emotion. Like I never thought about, what's underneath it, what's causing that anxiety. So that was brand new to me. But once I could see that and how it kind of manifests in my life, it made so much more sense. So much more sense.
Yeah. No, I literally thought that I was just an anxious person. So not only was that the emotion, that's who I was. Mm-hmm. Like I was defined by this experience. So our goal is to get to the open-hearted state. Go there.
Oops. Yeah. Sorry that I'm messing with the slides on you.
That's okay. Let's go forward one more.
All right. There we go.
Our authentic self, that's our core self. That's the person that's always there. That's like your true self. Other things get in the way, right? Life gets in the way. Life experiences get in the way. But that core self is always there. So our job is just to kind of uncover it. So we have a few minutes and we're going to do a quick little activity. And this will not be as long as it could be. It's a little meditative experience. And the idea here, you can fast forward to my picture. Yeah. The idea here is to let yourself just imagine and experience what this might be like. If you're not a really visual person, this might be a little bit tough. So if it's hard to do, don't worry about it. There are actually some people who cannot visualize things in their head. So if that's you, that's okay. you are able to, though, we'll work through this and also just kind of think about what is it like to experience a little meeting of your core self, right? And imagine what that might be like if you could even expand it and make it bigger. So see if you could find yourself in a comfortable position. You might want to close your eyes if that feels right. First, just become aware of your breath. Just the natural rise and fall. There's no need to change anything. Just notice it non-judgmentally. Allow your breath to flow in and out, slowly and rhythmically, just like waves in the ocean. Can you imagine hearing the waves of your breath? Imagine yourself standing on a sandy beach, listening to the waves as they gently crash on the shore, right in tempo with your breath. As you're standing on the beach, watching the waves lap at the shoreline, you can see something far out to sea, seemingly walking towards you. You watch this figure come closer and closer to shore. There's something oddly familiar about the shape, but you aren't able to identify what it is. All the while, the waves keep time with their gentle splashing and gurgling, and your breath easily rises and falls with the waves. Finally, the figure comes close enough to you for you to recognize them. It is you, your mirror image, your core neurobiological self, your best self. This self represents all the goodness and strength, clarity, courage that is deep within you, that is always in you no matter what the current experience. When you stand facing yourself, notice what comes up in you. What is it like to look into the eyes of your best self and feel all the energy emanating from this being? What is your impulse? Maybe you want to hug your best self, or let that self just merge within you. Maybe they make you angry and you would like to push them away. Or maybe you just want them to keep walking down the beach. Just notice what comes up with compassion and curiosity. There's room for all experiences. So return to the sensation of your breath. Just take a few more breaths as you return your attention to the present moment in this space. All together. So Erin, before we close out here, what was your impulse when you met your best self, your most authentic self?
So this is a really interesting part of the whole thing that I was kind of dreading a little bit, right? It's probably a little bit of like the stereotypical male impulses to like not want to feel silly or not want to, but the reality is, as I kind of face like, who is my authentic self, there's a little bit of shame that goes along with it. Like, why aren't I living in that authentic self already? What's keeping me from it, that sort of thing. And so I trying to be like curious about it, and honest is tricky. And I think that's where the change triangle, like, you have to continue to work through all of the different parts. It's not just something that's going to happen magically because you know this information. but how do you work through all those little nooks and crannies of what's kind of holding you back? I don't know. That's my reaction to this exercise.
Yeah. And it's not our like immediate impulse. It's not what we do first to like, oh, let me stand back, slow down,
Mm-hmm.
be curious and compassionate, because that's really the key. No judgment. Whatever comes up is just giving us information. And so if we're angry, if we want to fight our best self, if we want to ask them, hey, where have you been my whole life? Whatever your impulse is, that's where you are. So it's perfect. You noticed. It doesn't matter what the answer is. Just that's where you are. So it is really tricky, and it's an ongoing process. It's a lifelong process. We're constantly moving and recognizing where we are and where we would like to make some shifts or changes, all while like holding ourselves in compassion. Right? Especially over the last couple of years, I think teachers deserve a whole lot of compassion. And so we have to give that to ourselves too. Sometimes the world doesn't do such a great job giving compassion to people who deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, from early on in my teaching career, self-actualization for my students was a big deal. Like, how do I help my students self-actualize, be empowered, be kind to themselves, and be the best person they can be? But until recently, I never really thought about, I need to apply that same, those same concepts and that same frame of mind to myself. It's a strange dynamic that I think a lot of teachers kind of face. We get so caught up in the everyday of wanting to help others that we totally forget that this is a journey for us as well. And the other thing too, I wanted to just mention, please share all of this with others. Share the emails. Feel free to forward those emails on if you know people who you feel could benefit from the work that we've been doing together. Heather, thank you so much for spending the time with us today and all the work that you put in. And I know the next time I call you, I'm going to have to pay per hour because you have been my therapist for like the last 2 weeks. So I really appreciate all the work you've done to help me out as well. So thanks very much. And thank you everybody for joining today. I hope you enjoyed it. Look for part 4. Kevin Atlas is going to be our guest next month, in the month of December, first Wednesday in December. We'll get a chance to talk with Kevin, and that's always a treat. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you very much.
Take care.